Welcome to High ISO, the photography and business podcast,
where we talk about life as a professional photographer.
I'm Robert Hall, an editorial photographer from Michigan.
And I'm Justin Haugen, a wedding and portrait photographer from Arizona. What's up?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me on.
Welcome to the podcast. You're on High ISO, and I am Justin Haugen. This is Rob Hall.
Rob Hall? I was like, who are you introducing? Me or Taylor?
So we like to just get right into it. Rapid fire. Who are you? Where are you? What do you do? And hit us with that superhero origin story.
Okay, so my name is Taylor Brumfield. I am a beauty and product photographer based out of Woodbridge, Virginia. What do I do? What's the third question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, so I'm a commercial beauty and product photographer. I work with mostly skincare, cosmetics, and home lifestyle brands, so candles, makeup, skincare, that type of thing. And then my superhero origin story. We were chatting about this a little bit before we started, but I'm going to characterize it as two parts. So my first part of my origin story was I was in college and I joined a fashion magazine. And I wasn't very good at the time. I thought I was the bee's knees and chickpeas, but I really wasn't. And I presented my my portfolio to them because I wanted to be a photographer for the magazine and shoot editorials for them. And they said, I don't think your editorial you have the editorial spirit, so you can be a behind the scenes photographer. And I didn't like that. I don't like being told no. I'm extremely persistent. So the point at which they told me no, I decided, okay, no, that's just not going to work for me. I'm going to learn how to shoot a proper editorial. So I just buckled down. I started learning everything that I possibly could. And then, 10 years in the future, I'm now shooting. I own my own brand. I just moved into a studio, so I'm doing pretty well. And then about 4 years ago, I got pregnant and I ended up having to be a stay-at-home mom. And I was just really, really bored. And that's when I made my pivot into product and beauty photography. So before that, I was doing mostly beauty and some fashion and a lot of like e-commerce. And then we moved out into the middle of nowhere after I got pregnant. We bought a house out in the middle of nowhere. And I was extremely isolated, and I felt so dejected, and I just felt like giving up. But I didn't want to give up, so I pivoted into something that I could do really remotely, and that's how I got into product photography. And then it just so happens that about a year and a half, 2 years thereafter, the pandemic hit, and so I was already kind of building that groundwork for a product photography business, and it just was it was very serendipitous, not for a lot of people, but for me, that I already had that product photography business kind of already rolling. And then the pandemic hit, and I already had something that I could support myself with. So that's how I got to where I'm at now. So that's my origin story.
You're like me. You inadvertently swerved the pandemic, like flipping your business, because I was primarily a wedding photographer until 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And then I switched to editorial photography. And 2020 was like my first year of like, I'm primarily doing that now. And then that happened. And I was like, oh, I'm very fortunate that I didn't have a full roster of like 50 weddings. And I feel bad mentioning this because that was Justin's mainstay at the time. But you pivoted successfully as well, Justin. So, but it was crazy for people who were like highly dependent on events.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about
really
what areas of photography. Now that brings up the idea of like what's recession proof, like what genres can you keep shooting through a pandemic, and this very clearly is beauty and product. You can shoot that. I'm guessing. Do you have a home studio or do you have a location that you work out of?
So I actually just opened a location, Taylor B Studio, in Woodbridge in December. So I moved out of a spare bedroom we had at our home. I outgrew it. I just did not have the space, and I'm a very prop heavy product photographer, and I transitioned into an out-of-home
Yeah.
studio in December.
Yeah, because like you could
Mhm.
do wildlife photography, real estate photography. I'm sure I could keep going, but there's got this is one of those areas that's definitely a little more recession, or not necessarily recession, but
Mhm.
pandemic resistant. Because they always say like
Mhm.
weddings get infected by recessions, but they're definitely not pandemic proof. But uh,
They weren't.
yeah, that hurt. That hurt a lot. But we're big fans of your work. You have a
Thank you.
mastery of light and light play, shadow play. I love the stuff that I'm seeing in your work. Plus the retouch.
Thank you.
So,
And
which
your styling in the product work is phenomenal as well.
Thank you so much. That was actually something that I really wanted to get into when I first started product photography. Like I would see all these amazing sets. And I figured I could probably bring in a stylist, but I wanted to learn how to do it myself. And it's definitely something that I really, really enjoyed learning how to do because it's a whole skill set in and of itself. I think when I first started, I I really very much underestimated just how much like detailed skill goes into some of this set design and a lot of planning, and it's really an art form in itself, which is why like actual set stylists exist. Like that's a job all by itself. But I wanted to learn how to do all of the things myself, and then eventually team build. Like I'm currently fielding a few team members right now just to have them on here on call if I should need them or if I'm planning on doing like large projects. But I wanted to be able to maybe not master because I'm always learning something new, but be really adept at like all of the different aspects of creating a really, really comprehensive product photography shoot. So I really enjoyed styling. I don't know if you can see my joy through my work, but I really enjoy what I'm doing right now. And I'm definitely excited to keep on going.
I think one of the really nice things about like what you said, learning those other aspects is even if you're not doing it per se, like even if down the road you end up hiring somebody else to come on, at least you can speak the language to communicate
Hmm.
effectively with a team. And that translates to everything. Like I work on set a lot with like video projects, and it really helps to know
Hmm.
like the camera movement. And they're going to say, all right, we're going to jib in. And to know what that is really helps me to, not take a jib to the head or anything else. So it's really nice to just kind of broaden your skills at least enough to communicate. I tried doing that with makeup, and I still don't know what I'm doing.
No, absolutely. Once upon a time, I was actually a makeup artist,
Oh,
and that was extremely helpful when I got into beauty photography. Like just being able to communicate with the makeup artists on their level. Like first of all, it made the shoots go a lot more quickly. It also helped us plan out the aesthetic of the shoot because I could tell, hey, makeup artist, this is the look of the skin work I'm going for. This is the shape of the eye that I'm going for. And you learn the terminology, and it just makes the production that much more seamless and smooth. So when I'm learning something new, I not only prefer to learn like the what and the how, but like the why of something, and that way when I'm bringing in team members, I can communicate with them that much more effectively. That also, obviously helps the client have much more faith in me because they see that I'm really good at all the different aspects, and it increases the likelihood for them to come back because they know that they don't have to worry when they're working with me.
I feel like your line of work is something that would have been more location dependent, maybe like 10-15 years ago, but with the internet,
Mm-hmm.
you're able to have a bigger reach because the products can be
Mm-hmm.
sent to you, and you don't necessarily have to
Mm-hmm.
work with agency models or whatnot. But I see like like the models in your commercial portfolio, are those people you find in Woodbridge, or do you have to go anywhere to work with these kinds of talents? Like how are those parts of your work coming together in Woodbridge?
So generally, I mean, Woodbridge is a relatively small city. It's not a major city by any means. And a lot of people live here, but it's not like a commercial, center. The closest decent sized city is going to be DC. And then there's like Atlanta and New York and Philly and Baltimore. But the way that I source models and team members in general is I just hit Instagram. I hit Instagram, and there's practically infinite people on there for me to work with. I just have to network, and just kind of source those people out. because of my skill set currently, I generally get a lot of people coming to me, and I can just kind of weed through those prospective individuals and figure out who I want to work with. But yeah, I have clients all over the world. I'm actually working with a client from London next week, and then models will come in from all over. I had a girl come in from Michigan or Minnesota, one of them, to build her portfolio because she had deep dark skin, and she could not find a photographer up there who could properly light and color grade for her skin tone. So she found me, and she came all the way down here. Her mom paid for her to come down here, and she worked with me. So really, it's all just about networking and creating that like social perspective of like reliability and skill, so that people like have that impetus to come down and work with you.
That was actually
But
one of
really, yeah.
oh, sorry, that was one of the
No,
things
go
that
ahead.
I really noticed in your portfolio is not only like the diversity of the skin tones, but they like whoever it was and whatever the depth of their skin tone, I was like, it just looks perfect. Like it looks like how the
Thank you.
person should be replicated. So how I think that's a struggle for a lot of photographers,
Mm.
whether it's like the color or the luminosity aspect. And so I guess what skills did you even kind of go after to learn how to authentically represent people's skin tones and colors?
So for me, oh gosh, this is a can of worms right here. But there's so many different aspects to getting like really nice glowy skin, because that's my thing is like regardless of the skin tone of the person that I'm working with, like the skin is going to glow, right? Like there's going to be a luminosity to it. And what I look at when I'm especially shooting with people who have darker skin is making sure that the skin is very well moisturized, because darker skin is going to absorb a lot of the light, right? Like a shadow, so it's going to absorb a lot of that light, and so you want to make sure that that skin is well moisturized, and then put something luminous on top of the skin. So there's actually like makeup products, like creams and liquid highlighting products that you can put onto skin, and it'll help bounce some of that light off. So I generally have anywhere between 15 and 20 different products like with me, either in my studio or at home, depending on where I'm working. I have a bunch of those products in all different colors and finishes. And that way, when I get the model here, even if I don't have a makeup artist, I can very quickly mix some of that product into some lotion, and just put it on my model. And that way they can bounce some of that light and still give like a really lovely luminous glow. What's also really important is making sure that the light isn't too hard.
Hmm.
I mean, you could still use hard light. Like if you want to use a bare bulb, that's totally fine. But you need to be careful of the distance away from the subject, so that they still have enough light to fill in the shadows and give some definition on the person. And then the inverse would be true with like a very like light or fair skinned person. You might want to diffuse that light a little bit, so that they're not bouncing so much and they look like like an orb, right? So
Yeah.
you like with a darker skinned person, you might want to um, you can definitely use harder light, but you still have to be careful about like the placement of it, and then just make sure that they're very well moisturized and there's maybe something luminous on the skin to bounce the light off. And then with like a fairer skinned person, just diffuse that light down, and that way they retain some of their contours too.
I think what
But no, go ahead. What are you
I
gonna say?
think what people don't realize about skin tone is basically like photographing a piece of glass with varying degrees of
Hmm.
reflectivity. So on lighter skin, we don't notice specular highlights as much because the contrast is less
Hmm.
apparent. If you photograph a white car in bright daylight, you don't see those blown out highlights as noticeably as you would if you shot a black car. And you had so it's all
Hmm.
about the angle of incidence. So you're basically shooting a reflective piece of it's the skin is like glass, and on darker skin it's just more noticeable, so people have to manage light placement relative to the angle of incidence, otherwise you get those glary
Hmm.
spots. It's something I've noticed working with
Hmm.
different skin tones. And I think at a certain point though, because maybe you're committed to a certain look and a certain modifier, you're just going to get those things, it's going to happen. And I feel like a good
Hmm.
way out of it though is great retouchability, which you definitely have. So like, do you have any favorite retouch techniques that help you get through some of those lighting scenarios?
Lots of dodge and burn, just lots and lots and lots of dodge and burn. So I prefer to work mostly with non-destructive techniques. If I have some, really pesky makeup or, something that I can get away with frequency separation, I might add a couple of frequency separation layers in there. But most of my retouching is just going to be just a disgusting amount of dodge and burn. And so I do my local dodge and burn to get rid of like blemishes or hyperpigmentation or dark spot or like whatever the case may be, fine lines, wrinkles, etc. And then really bringing out the definition, like giving the highlights and the contours back to the person, especially because in the raw format, it can flatten your photo a little bit. So to bring all of that back, I do like some really exaggerated curves layers, and I just highlight and contour the form back into the person. And then you can feather your curves layers a little bit on that adjustment layer. You can feather those edges so that they look softer on the edges. They're not quite so stark and apparent.
With like a
But really
blend
just like
diff.
a lot of Dr. Bird. Yeah, you can totally use blend diff. Yeah, you can totally use it.
Yeah.
I generally don't. I will often use blend diff for like color work, but with the curves layers, you can just feather it
Yeah.
or just reduce the curve if it's too exaggerated. And then don't be afraid to use multiple layers. Like I mean, on some projects I get up to 50, 75, 100 layers. Like, and that's okay.
Wow.
Just have like a decent labeling system. Don't feel like you need to do everything on the one layer. Like if you're doing dodge and burn, you can have 15, 20 layers. Like that's okay. Just start shipping, like start at the center and just start shipping your way out. Like you don't have to do everything all at
And
once.
when you save your file
Yeah, I think
names, you'll start with, beauty product 1, beauty product 1 final, beauty product final 1 rough 2, beauty product final 1 rough point 3. Yeah. Just keep going from there.
dash
Right.
BW.
Client like this one client. Yes, exactly. So that's really what it is. Just like have a decent, as long as you understand, because I'll send stuff off and the client will be like, why is it named, this? And it's like, I understand it. Like that's all that matters. It's like, I understand the file name and I'm able to find the file. If you want this new file, I can go and find it in my hard drive. That's all that matters. It's just have a decent filing system.
So what was the process like from a business perspective in terms of identifying clients? Did you find it pretty easy because you were already working in a portrait context, so it was pretty easy to navigate into like the physical products, or did you have to
Mm-hmm.
kind of change everything?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both, actually. I am for my business, I like to use the idea of kind of like playing chess and constantly like thinking ahead and always creating the groundwork and like the foundation for things that are happening 4 or 5 steps in the future. So I already knew before we moved up into DC, like we went to school in Tallahassee at Florida State, Go Knowles. We went to school down there and then we moved up to DC after we graduated. I already kind of knew down in DC that I might be wanting to get into beauty photography. So this is when I was still doing like e-commerce and like fashion. I already knew that I wanted to get into beauty photography. So I was already starting to network with makeup artists and models and other people up here in DC like 2 and 3 years before we even got here. And that way, when I got up here, I mean, I didn't have a massive network because a lot of people, it's like you have to be or a lot of times you have to be boots on the ground to get to know certain people. But I already had like a small network that I could build off of and grow from there. And then I already knew but this was before I quit my job and like became a full-time photographer. I already knew that I might want to get into product photography. I knew that it would take a time investment and I didn't have the time investment to sit there and like learn the product photography, but I knew that I would probably need some clients, right? So I started reaching out to brands at that point and just communicating with them, hey, what are your needs? Hey, do you have something coming out? Do you just talking to these people, getting to know them. And that way, when I officially hit the scene as a product photographer 3 years after that, I already had prospective clients. So like once I officially was like, oh, hey, you guys, I'm a product photographer now. People were already waiting for me. They're like, oh, we knew you were about to become a product photographer. Let's go ahead and book you. So that way I kind of hit the scene. I mean, it wasn't a flood of clients. Like I'm still kind of like growing within that space, but it was enough to get me going and at least, enough to recoup my cost of doing business at the time. So I was already like sowing those seeds a couple of years in advance. And that way, when my skill set of actually being able to, shoot that thing finally caught up, I already had, some people sitting there waiting for me.
Very good. All right. That was like a really good answer. And I asked this because I'm intentionally asking like a lot of questions because I have like one client in particular who is who has like it's a very large e-commerce client here locally, and I do all of like their sock work, but they also have
Mm-hmm.
some beauty and health brands out there, and I think they're trying to like make a push into covering those beyond pure white, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I was just wondering, and I'm also like, when it comes to making content, it's kind of funny because like I've always looked at product photography as like, it's not very exciting because there is no human involved. But I'm a huge lighting nerd, and so
Mm-hmm.
the idea of product photography like really interests me because I don't think there's a place with like more more intense lighting nerds than product photography.
I
You have
agree.
to be so specific, and like the more I'm seeing it a lot in like reels on Instagram stuff, and like tricks that people are using and techniques that people
Mm-hmm.
are using in styling, and it goes hand in hand, like the styling and the lighting and how people are bringing it together. But I guess I don't know, I always underestimated product photographers, and now I'm like, oh, here's where the lighting brainiacs are.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And these people are so serious. They're so intense. Like, oh my God. I'm in this product photography group on Facebook, and some of the rigs that these people come up with, like they're true artists. It's amazing to watch these people work. And it's just how their minds work to be able to control light in this way. Because light's like a physical thing, like little photons shooting around doing their
Yeah.
thing. It's a physical thing. And the way that they're able to just like take light from like 8 different strobes and concentrate that light from these powerful strobes down into like tiny little beams to light like a thumbtack. Like it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
honestly some of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my entire life. And I think that a lot of people really underestimate just how technical this space can be. I mean, it doesn't have to be that. Like, I've seen some amazing work with just like the sun and, cardboard box covered in aluminum. Like I've seen it, but it can become extremely technical. And I think a lot of people really underestimate it because the people factor isn't there. But it's still an extremely technical space. Like even just the pre-production aspect of planning out some of these shoots, it's wild. Just the rigging to get some of this stuff to hover in the air, wild. And then the production, the styling, it's mind blowing. It's honestly mind blowing. I would love to visit some of these large studios in like New York or LA or London and just be like a fly on the wall and watch some of these people work because they are absolutely brilliant. They
I
really
want to
are.
do it with the people who have the like the 15-foot robot arm for product video, where they like
Yes, and it
pre-program the
just like
pathway and it's all over the
yes,
place.
it's so cool.
Wait,
Yeah,
what is
It's
that's
this
so
really
cool,
robot
and it
arm?
just it whirs down, and it's like an arm on a base, and you can program it to follow your product around and do stuff. So you know how on like Burger King commercials, for example, they drop the bun and it like follows, like the camera follows the ingredients down. That's a little robot arm, and it's just like following the ingredients down, and you can do that with so many things.
Yeah, you
We
got
can it's infinite.
people are combining it with that that really wacky macro lens. I forget what it's
The
called. It's like a
Laowa.
Oh,
Laowa
the 20
15 mil. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
It's the probe lens. So people are
uh-huh.
combining it, and it's like they're like tracking like the neck of a wine bottle as like as wine exits it, and they'll like pour the wine out, and then it'll flip into the glass and splash. Like
Mhm.
I can't imagine the
It's
engineering and the timing to
magnificent.
like dial the focus and the position
Right.
and the lighting in. It's
And then the
really,
lighting.
yeah, it's incredible
It's
stuff.
amazing.
I'll have to
It
send you
is.
some examples, Justin, if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, send me the robot arm.
It's a rabbit hole. It's definitely a rabbit. Like if you see some of the stuff they're doing, you're not going to be able to stop watching these videos. Like it's honestly like just to think about the technicalities of it. Like the videos are cool, but just from the photographer aspect, like the brain power that went into this stuff,
Taylor,
it's mind-boggling.
have you played with any of the, not from like the camera perspective, but I know that there's like a lot more accessibility now in terms of like light robotics for like kind of launching or pushing products, or even like positioning or maybe tossing them in the air for a brief moment to be captured. Have you done any of that?
Never,
No.
but I'm gonna write that down
Th-
and go
I
look
could
into
send you the
that.
kit that I'm looking at. It's
Could
like
you?
around $1,000, and it kind of just gets you into some like light pulleys and stuff for like if you're doing little short reveals, or if you
Yeah.
just need something to like kind of hover for a second, like pop it up. Because you were
Uh-huh.
mentioning the rigging systems, and like I know fishing line and bottles and stuff is such a pain to like get the gravity and stuff right. So I'm
It
looking at these
is. They just
robotics
sway
now.
back and forth. Yes, if you could send that to me, and
Absolutely.
$1,000 is so accessible. It's crazy the advancements in technology
Hmm.
that you can just go out and buy this stuff commercially.
Yeah.
I think that's why there's a lot more interest in product photography now. It's just because things are well not affordable, like they're not cheap, but
Right.
people you can just buy it commercially and you have commercial access. You don't need
They're
like a
available.
license. You don't.
Yeah.
Yes,
I got turned off
that's so
from
cool.
product photography early in my career.
Oh
Oh,
no.
it's it. I think I could have a renewed interest in it if it came to it. But when I first started doing photography, I had a client who he was from New York, and he had a men's underwear brand, and he did some jewelry, and he wanted me. I was photographing his jewelry, and it was kind of a turnkey operation. Every time I did product photography, it was more like e-commerce, like shoot it on the display and rotate the next thing out.
Hmm.
And I just remember my back hurting a lot. And I was like 22, my back hurt, and I couldn't. It soured my experience with product photography in terms of like it felt like a very turnkey operation. But then now that I've been being more exposed to this type of commercial product photography, I'm like, oh, I think I could work my brain around this. Like, it's not trying to make 50 shots in a row of different products. It's like spending your time to build up the set and make like the thinking is more to build up one shot. I could totally mess with
Hmm.
that versus what I had done. So I think my idea of what product photography was has definitely changed over the years. So this is a much more involved setup.
It
What's
is.
your most like complex shot if you had one that you could refer to?
Oh Lord. Anything with those darn
Yeah.
flowers. Flowers are extremely sensitive. And like some of these flowers, like I was working with ranunculus like recently. They're these like super petally, swirly, they grow in swirls basically. And I don't know if it was maybe just because I sourced them from like a super cheap vendor or if they maybe are just leaving the season. But some of these flowers, if you breathe on them too hard, they will fall apart. And so if you have a client that it's like, I need poppies or I need delphinium, and so you have to go and get the flowers, which is extremely difficult. Like sourcing some of these goods is just, I mean, just the networking that goes into sourcing some of this stuff is just absurd. And so then you finally source it, and then they only stay alive for like 6 hours. So then you have to quickly do the stuff and
I can
then
relate.
like shoot it. And then if you take it out of the water to be able to stage it, like it's not hard. It's just, it takes a lot of thinking. Like it's not, the work is not hard. Like that's what I try to explain to people is it's not, I mean, it's physically a lot. It's extremely physically taxing. So you have to enjoy the work if you're going to do it. Otherwise, you're just gonna be tired physically and mentally all the time. But I try to explain to people like the work is not hard. It just requires a lot of thinking to like put together a game plan, especially if you're working with like live goods, because the stuff will fall apart. It'll get moldy, or some of the stuff is just not sourceable. So anything that has to do with flowers, especially if the client is insisting on using flowers that are not in season, that's definitely that takes the most strategy. Is there anything to do with it? And I know probably from the outside looking in, it's like, Taylor, that's not a lot of work, but it is. It is because it just takes so much strategy to be able to put some of this stuff
Well,
together.
like
I'm
So
just
anything,
gonna
anything that you say
with
there,
the quality of your shots, I'm just gonna take your word for it that that's a pain.
thank you. Thank you. I enjoy it and I love what flowers do to a photo. I love the whimsy, I love the joy of a good spread of flowers, but like some of the floral work, there are stylists up in New York and out in LA whose whole job and like profession is floral
wow.
styling. Like that's their job because it's a thing all by itself that takes like a lot of mental training and physical training. There's a lot of know-how, like keeping some of these flowers alive for multiples of days of shooting. Like it's a skill. And so that's what I've really been playing with recently is working with flowers and learning how to do this. I'm noticing that not everybody knows how to work with live goods. So that's something that I've really been playing with is learning how to work with like botanicals and natural organic elements and implementing those into my photo so that they look nice, and learning how to use those goods over multiple days, um, as they're starting to die, but still like really setting myself up for success for like post production. So anything that you see with florals or like botanicals, that was definitely the most mentally involved work.
I have a
I
question,
hope that
and
makes
hopefully,
sense.
I hope this isn't like too far into the weeds, but I'm really curious because you mentioned coming from the makeup background, going into fashion photography, and then navigating into
Hmm.
product photography, which involved learning styling, which is more in depth in lighting, and then you go into like this the florist styling and sourcing that. What are your resources for like identifying how to learn a new skill? So like it sounds like you're like self-teaching yourself in a lot of these categories.
Yeah.
How are you like validating what pathway to choose with that, or like what sticks out to you? Who are you leaning on to find that information? Because I think it sounds like you're finding really good resources for learning.
You know, it's a lot of it's mostly actually just having a really good network of friends, and making friends with people who know more than I do, you know. I think it's also a lot of giving back, and not just taking and taking and taking information. It's known within my photography community that if somebody has a question, or if I post something and somebody's intrigued by something and they want to know about it, I don't mind answering that question. And I think people can sense that energy and they want to reciprocate that onto me. And so if I have a question about something, there's people that I can jump in their inbox and ask really, really detailed questions, and they don't mind answering that because they know that I'm going to give that to the next person in need. So I really haven't taken a lot of like structured courses. I really haven't attended a lot of like classes. It's a lot of like just putting my head down and working because I practice a lot. Like I'm shooting almost every single day. I'm practicing almost every single day. And then also just surrounding myself with people who are like-minded, as me. And if I have a question, I'm not afraid to ask. And a lot of observation too, you know, and then also learning like the why of something. I think
Hmm.
that's something I've always been really adamant about. Like even when I first picked up a camera, it's like why is ISO? Like not just that, but like why is it this and why is shutter speed? And that way I have like a really nice, solid, comprehensive foundation of knowledge that I can always build on. And so that way if I find myself stuck or I'm like approaching a hurdle, I can strategize like how to get over that hurdle or like around that hurdle, um, without feeling stuck because I already have like previous information to go off
Yeah,
on.
I think with lighting, you definitely get to a point of proficiency when you've done it long enough that you have a higher we
Hmm.
get to a higher level of understanding of what light's doing, and you're observing it in your own work and in other people's work. A lot of the discovery isn't study. It isn't like reading books or anything. It's you have to do it through practice. And I had a studio for a
Hmm.
couple years, and I'm not a big studio shooter, but the time I spent in the studio was really informative it informed a lot of the stuff I do with light now because I was observing just the most minuscule changes in lighting, the position, the distance to my subject, the modifiers using just little changes that made dramatic changes in the final result. It's just stuff you don't get there unless you practice often and see and observe,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all just discovery and play. You have to like practice to make these mistakes and figure this stuff out. Otherwise you just don't get there.
Yep. Exactly. Like at some point you start to be able to like read light. And I know that sounds so cliche, but like I can look at a photo and be like, oh yeah, they probably like used an octabox for this, like because of this. Or they probably used like a softbox and maybe like a modifier. Oh, they probably shot this through a scrim. Like you get to be able to like read the light and how those shadows, well, specifically the shadows, you can read shadows and then you can figure out how those shadows relate to the product, and then you can go through your dossier of all the different kinds of modifier that exists, and narrow down exactly probably how they shot this, or in the very least, like if they didn't shoot it that way, be able to replicate it with another method. So like it really is just a lot of like practice, just practice, like lots and lots and lots of work. It's definitely one of those product photography is definitely one of those niches where you have to put in your 10, 20, 30,000 hours. Like you have to.
Yeah.
You cannot cut corners, and you can tell when people have cut corners in this work because you can't hide it behind. You can't hide that. I hesitate to call it laziness, but you can't hide that behind a joyful child or a cute baby. You can't hide it behind that. Like your product is there, and you have to just suck it up and do the work. So it really is just kind of sitting down and doing a lot of observing and practicing and just doing what needs to be done and doing all your work.
Well, nerd,
Talking about practice.
talking about practice. I just talked about that
I've been waiting
yesterday.
I've been waiting the whole period. Just Taylor's like, whatever. This was a Allen Iverson quote from basketball a long time ago.
It might have been before my time.
Wait.
I've never been a basketball fan though.
Why Tamron lenses? Because your photos can look like this, and this, and yes, even this. Whether enthusiast or pro, your photography skills can be heightened with the right lens. Tamron.
So nerd out with me for a second here. Like, what does your common light setup look like then? Like, what kind of gear is populating your studio right now? Like, what are you crafting around? Like, what kind of like lighting equipment are you using to set up these images?
So I've recently been experimenting with some Westcots. I was originally I have pro photos here, but I was sent some Westcots, and I'm really really enjoying those, the FJ400s. So I have 3 of those currently. My go-to modifier is a 24 by 36 inch softbox. I love it. It's a super versatile modifier because you can have it like right up on the product and get some like really gorgeous, round lighting. But you can also scoot it away and get some great contour and definition out of it. And then I don't know if you can tell, but I love a hard shadow. So I will often go with right, I do.
I see it.
So I will often go bare bulb, and just not use any modifiers at all. And if anything, maybe just use like a bounce card or a flag or something to give myself some definition. I also really like using those reflector modifiers with grids. Those are really fun. I love a good 30-degree and 50-degree grid. And then for beauty, I love a large umbrella. I want to say the umbrella is 51 inches. I want to say it's a 51-inch umbrella. And I also really like using hard beauty dishes. And then I will, depending on the subject and like the feel of the shoot, I might diffuse my modifiers for beauty as well.
Have you heard of a hard box?
Yes.
Isn't that thing
Yes.
weird?
And it's magnificent.
You've used it?
Yes.
Oh.
I loved it. I loved it. It was so cool. It was so cool how it just like it like focused the light, because normally the light kind of goes like, and then like depending on how far away, it just kind of spreads out more. But like this hard box, like I could literally have it like 10 feet away. Granted, you need a really powerful strobe. Like obviously you need a really powerful strobe, but I could have it like 10, 15 feet away, and it would still like focus this beam of light like straight at it's almost like a spotlight. It's not quite so hard as like a Fresnel or a spotlight, but it's still really really cool to have. I've had one sitting in my cart for like the past, and I just can't justify it. I just can't justify, and it just keeps getting more and more expensive over time. But
Yeah, I know
I
Pro Photo has one, and what, it's like
mhm.
$1,200, right?
Yeah, looking at it.
Yeah, at last check, it was like 1,200, 1,300, something like that. Once upon a time, like a couple years ago, it was like $1,000. So it's definitely just getting pricier and pricier because I think they discontinued it.
Hmm.
So, but it's just been sitting in my cart. But I have used them before. I've used them before, and they're really cool to play with.
I'm gonna try and make one. That doesn't exist for my mount, but I'm gonna try to make one. I don't think it's that complicated because I know the big part of it is the fact that your light is tilted vertically to shrink the
And then
size
it
of the bare
goes.
ball relative to your subject.
hmm
But beyond that, it's largely just stopping the bounce,
Yeah,
so you get that
and
direct path.
I think so, and I think there's a mirror, like a 45-degree mirror in there. So it's like boom, boom, and then the mirror is like right here. And that's
Oh,
what creates that beam. Because if it was just the L, it would get stuck. A lot of that would get stuck in the corner. So there
right.
has to be something to actively like bounce that light out. So I think it's like a really nice mirror that the Profoto one has inside there
Hmm.
that like actively bounces those photons like up and out the L,
I need
Yeah, I think
this.
I think.
I'm gonna rent one and then try it out, and then from there I'm gonna see if I can try to like hack one myself for a Bowen's
I've
mount.
seen tutorials. Look it up. I've seen tutorials
Okay.
on like homemade hard box type modifiers. Like it's online
Yeah,
somewhere. Like I've seen it.
I need to
I'll
see an
dig it up.
example of this. It's the crazy thing about hard light. It's soft light has become like the lowest barrier of entry in the lighting world. I feel like everyone who enters a space with lighting subjects is like, gotta have a softbox, gotta give me like a 70-inch octabox or whatever. Everything, the bigger the better. They want soft light. Soft light that has become like the barometer for what qualifies as like a pleasant off-camera flashlit image. But to me, like what's mastery over light is some the work I see with really hard light and the way the shadow play and how they fill the shadows on a hard lit image. Like
hmm
that stuff to me is like the level of acuity is just so high in some of the more masterful commercial work I see. It's really, that's the mark of a real light master, is using that light pleasingly.
Let's
I
be honest.
agree, especially. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I agree, especially how they can like get like these really gorgeous defined shadows, which means the light's like super far away, but also they're not blowing out their highlights. Like there's some real skill happening there. There really is. Like there's a lot of thought that goes into doing work like that.
I was gonna say if
hmm
you're talking like 48 to 70 in softbox though, like you literally have, I don't know, 120 degrees that you can place it relative to the subject and it'll look fine. Like it'll produce some
Mhm.
type of good portrait lighting. And so there's,
hmm
just point it at them and it'll be decent. So I think that's why it's become, that de facto entry level modifier. But yeah, I certainly agree because you do not have that same luxury with hard lighting. You're off by degrees, 1 or 2 degrees, and you're talking about completely different looks and placements of highlights and shadows.
We are nerding out. I love it.
We are. Like don't get me if you get me talking about specifically product photography, I can and have spoken for hours at length. I was at imaging last year, and my class was 3 hours. Well, no, in January, my class was 3 hours long, and I got to the end of the 3 hours, and I still wasn't done talking. So I know that I can, I know that I can talk about product photography, but lighting, I love to talk about lighting and color. Color is a whole thing. I don't know if you guys are fascinated by color, but there's like a whole like psychology behind like why colors do certain things to the brain and how brands like utilize that understanding of yes, yes,
That's a really good
how
book on
brands
color.
utilize that and like they get those colors to interact with their products and get all of that story to like interact with their clients. Like there's a whole science behind all of that. It's fascinating.
Rob, what was that you held up so you can like explain that to the audio listening audience and not the video people?
Sure. I held up a book called If It's Purple, Someone's Gonna Die, which is an excellent entry book into like color theory and how color motivates the the feelings in your images
Yeah.
or in images in general. It uses a lot of cinema references.
Yeah, like blue is associated with business and commerce, and I mean, I'm just like on the basic level, red, obviously passion, love, anger, just those ideas, like that color theory stuff really plays in images. And I think
They
I don't
do.
think people, I think that's also like, that might be like if you went to art school. I went to art school, so so I have some of that in my background. I think about how color, complementary colors, supplementary colors, how this stuff, the psychology of color in the images, and I think that's like the next threshold. Like once you have a mastery of the basics, like that's where people should be diving into. Color is so important. I feel like it's getting neglected in the lower levels of
I
photography.
think so too. I think people, it's not like an obvious thing. I think people like generally value lighting more than color, but they play off of each other. They play off each other. They go hand in hand. Like if you have amazing color work and like terrible lighting, then it's just gonna look like a colorful blob, right? But if you have like amazing lighting and then it's just like a black and white image, like where's the feeling in that image? Like they're both really, really necessary. I think that a lot of people coming into this field, again, I think they're bypassing a lot of those fundamentals. I think color often gets tossed to the wayside.
Well, if you look at the very like rudimentary, like the base level skill that most people are trying to learn, doing portraiture,
Mm-hmm.
we'll start there, is a well exposed subject, and that they aren't
Mm-hmm.
overblown or underexposed. That's the only objective. And when you do that, it throws color to the wayside, because if you're backlighting your subject and you lose all the color in the sky because you're trying to preserve detail in the shadows on your subject, it just colors the last thing you're thinking about. You're just like, oh, I want to see this person's face, and everything else gets thrown to the
Mm-hmm.
wayside. So I think that skill set doesn't lend itself to color, and the goal is to just get well exposed images.
Yeah, and I feel like that's fair. I feel like that's totally fair. Is that one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all start somewhere, and it's just one step at a time. I think part A is like just learning how to like you take your camera out of the box, you turn it on, you take a picture, and the photo is completely black, and so you're frustrated, for a couple of weeks until you figure out like, oh, like the exposure triangle, and then you learn how to use your exposure triangles. That's part A, right? And then part B is learning how to make your people not orange or not green or not blue or not yellow, like depending on what lighting you're shooting in. So it's definitely a step by step, and hopefully that people who genuinely enjoy the work and enjoy the art learn all of those aspects and enjoy uh, doing really well in all of those spaces, as opposed to just like prioritizing one over the other, because again they do all go hand in hand.
Well, it's actually like really difficult when you think about it, and you zoom back to like how long it takes you to kind of like get to these levels where you're where we're this focused on color or this focused on lighting. It's a lot just to get here. So I think a lot of people get worn out, or a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like grow sick of learning because, well, let's be honest, you can make a lot of money in this industry with a lot lower level of education of photography. This isn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily required, and it's really only the people who are like really enthralled with the technology or possibilities that make it this far.
I think of it in
That's not. Oh,
I
go
think of
ahead.
it in
You
these.
first. Go
I
ahead.
think of this as like if you really love photography, and it hasn't worn you out yet. Like, I've been shooting for 18 years, full time for 9. I think in year 18, I'm a more eager student of photography than I was in year 1. And in year 1, though, it's like a
Mm-hmm.
floodgate of information coming in as you're trying to figure out all these basic skills. Everything is a new skill. Everything excites you. And now I'm in year 18. I'm still excited, but now it's more nuanced, and I'm still trying to chase that information
Mm-hmm.
down and be a student of photography. And I think photography is one of those things that will give you lessons for a lifetime if you stick with it.
I agree.
I have a great idea. Wait, sorry. Go ahead. Continue, Kayla.
Oh, no problem. I was just gonna say I agree with you. And something that I've really had to focus on is my mental framing, because it can be a lot. Like it can be extremely overwhelming because I'm having to learn photography. I'm having to like network. I have to like run my own back end and deal with clients and like all of their client needs. and I have to like still be like pleasant, right? Like so it can be a lot. And so my mental framing has been, you know, to enjoy the journey itself. Like my goal isn't to get to the end of any of this. I really enjoy the the journey of getting from where I'm at now to wherever I'm going. And obviously that doesn't mean like negate the strategy or negate like planning or putting stepping stones in place. And you know, I'm putting together like my 3, 5, and 10 year plans, but I'm still really enjoying the pursuit of knowledge, and not just getting completely caught up in the business aspect. So there's still a part of me that's an artist, and the artistry is what really fuels my want to be a better business owner. And if I ever lose my artistry, hopefully I don't, you know, because I'm still really enjoying what I do. But if I should ever lose my artistry, you know, at that point I'd probably close my business. But the artistry and the pursuit of knowledge is really what drives me. And that way I can still remain so passionate, even if I'm constantly hitting all these different hurdles.
What I was thinking about, what I was thinking that would be fun and would just also be helpful for the audience is, what if everybody shared what is like the most recent significant lesson or epiphany that you've had regarding the industry of photography?
Hmm.
On the spot.
Right.
Do you
You're
want?
making me think.
So I'd love to. I can start because like this one is probably going to sound shocking, and Justin, I kind of already shared this with you, but like I just learned very recently that the inverse square law does not apply to all lighting sources. Is anybody else like?
Oh, we talked about this, so I'm not blown yet. But Taylor's gears
yeah.
are spinning.
So the inverse square.
Explain.
The inverse square law does not apply to a collimated light source. It only applies to an omnidirectional light source. So a umbrella or a softbox or anything like that, where light is going to travel equidistant, it's going to go out wider and more narrow over distance. Those will be subject to the inverse square law. But when you get into a collimated light source like a Fresnel or mag beam or parabolic reflector, those are producing light that primarily travels in straight lines, and therefore it does not travel wider and more high, so it doesn't fall off in the same pattern.
Think
So this is
spotlight.
why
Stage spotlight.
Oh, so it has its own law. What's its law called?
It doesn't really. It just doesn't. Like, if there's nothing to obstruct it, light will just keep traveling. Now, atmosphere over distances will eventually get rid of it, which is why a lighthouse doesn't go on forever. But technically, like, and there is a little bit of growth over distance, but for the most part, it doesn't lose any intensity to like any law. It completely depends on its surrounding.
And that could be diffraction from like humidity in the air, maybe water molecules over distance. So I could see why eventually it would start to go outward. But yeah, I get that.
Yeah, it's very, very minor diffusion, but like left without anything else, it would just not stop. Light would just travel on forever.
Stop. Like in a vacuum.
Like a star.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? Oh. So this is why, like, if you're ever doing mental math with like a Fresnel head as a modifier and you like double the distance and it doesn't drop 2 stops, that's why. I just learned that very recently. Know. Yeah, right? Isn't that crazy?
The more you know.
I hope people appreciate these things on the podcast.
Yeah, be a special kind of nerd, but
here we are.
That was interesting. Thank you. Yeah, that's gonna make me think about it. Yeah. Where do I guess grids fit into all of this? Because gridding stops the light from traveling.
Grid is just
its focus is it.
Yeah, it's also
is it somewhere in the middle?
Absorbing it, maybe.
Isn't a grid just a diffuser? Isn't it just a diffuser that does this instead of that?
I mean, it absorbs light because it's black, but its purpose is just obstructing angles, like light from spreading. So I don't know. And is that different between a softbox? Is that different on a softbox versus a reflector?
A gridded light responds to the inverse square law.
Yeah.
Doubling distance. Yeah.
So. I guess it's still traveling outward, just less outward.
Yeah,
less.
The spread of it is and you're losing light anyway.
I'm gonna have to go look all of this up. This is so
All right,
interesting.
let's camera nerd for a second. Entertain us with what kind of gear are you using? Like, what's your daily carry gear wise, as far as like how are you shooting these images? Because they look amazing. So I'm thinking you've got some
Thank
kind of
you.
high megapixel camera, even though that may not be necessary. But I'm guessing,
It's not
yeah,
necessary. It's not, because I started with a D3100. I'm a Nikon
yeah,
girl, always have been, always will
former
be.
Nikon.
Um, come back over here. Come back over here to Nikon side. But I'm a Nikon girl. Started with a Nikon D3100. That was my college camera, and I did a lot of work with that camera. I think it was like 15, 16 megapixels, like something like manageable, but not like super high. If you understand light, you can still get a really, really clean. I mean, these photos weren't being blown up on the billboards, on the side of like barges. Like they were mostly still digital, so you can still get really clean images with a starter camera. But since I got into beauty, I definitely needed those pixels. So I went into a D610, and then my kids poured a beverage on it. So that had to be put out the pasture.
The
And
kid or
then
the camera?
my kid, yeah, she poured tea specifically, like right onto the camera. So it still functions, but just not at a very high level. And then I went to a D850. That is my current body. And then I work with Tamron, obviously. So all of my lenses are Tamron. Most of my beauty work, and actually, I'd probably say 75% of my product work is with the 90 macro. It's since been discontinued, but it's still an amazing lens. And then my secondary lens for product is the 24 to 70 2.8. Love that lens, super clean, super fast. And I want to say that one is still in production. And then my secondary lens for beauty is the 70 to 200 2.8. So those are my three lenses, and that's all I really use.
You could probably reduce your work down to like one lens. It'd probably be that 24 to 70, huh? You could probably do like most of your work with that.
Oh, probably. Oh, probably. I am an absolute sucker for texture, though. Like, I don't know if you can tell, like, I love a texture. So if I can use that 90, I probably will. But if I absolutely had to, I could totally get by with the 24 to 70. Yeah, absolutely.
Do
Like if
you
I go on a trip, I take my 24 to 70 with me.
do you do a lot of focus stacking for the products with the 90?
Not too much.
No.
No, because my sets aren't generally very wide. I usually have like pretty compressed sets. When I do focus stacking, it might be something like the recent shot I did with the lipsticks, where like I had to be right up on close up on them because lipsticks are so tiny. You have to get like right up close to them in order to get the texture.
Mhm.
So I had to do one shot for the lipstick in the foreground and then one shot for the lipstick, even though they were literally like an inch apart.
Yeah.
That's when I might have to do that if the textures are just really, really small. That's when I might do some focus stacking. But my sets are generally quite narrow. They're not generally very deep either. So
Okay.
if I can just amp up my lights and narrow down my aperture a little bit, I usually don't have to focus stack very much.
I was just playing around with it the other day and I was like looking at the depth of field on like a cologne bottle that was on like a pretty steep angle, like a 45-degree angle. And I was like,
Hmm.
man, I'm like I could totally make a use case for like a f64 lens. Like f11 is not enough in some cases. It's ridiculous.
It's not. It's not. I'm usually actually around like F16, F18.
Okay.
Wow.
That's usually where I'm
It's a
sitting.
totally different mindset working in that space. So I've got a pretty big commercial shoot coming up the next month, and the product I'm shooting is a missile, and I have to. It's long. It's 12 feet long, and I'm already thinking like, oh
Hmm.
man,
Oh
how am I going
wow.
to get like I got to make sure that I get as much of it in focus. It's a hero shot.
Yeah,
Yeah. So my brain is just like I'm taking like your set pieces and making it large enough for a 12-foot item, and I've got to
that's so cool.
my head spinning trying to wrap around like what am I going to do lighting wise and depth of field and setup, and yeah, so
Oh,
but
and then a diffusion so that you
How
can see that it's
restrictive is your
curved.
environment?
yeah,
Yeah.
oh, very restrictive environment too, and we have to shoot at a later time of day into the evening time because we're gonna have like some set pieces are changing for the mood of the shoot. It's a lot, and also some talent that I have to manage, and probably a couple assistants. And then I'm thinking gear, and it's outdoors. If it's windy, it's been windy lately. How am I going to manage all the grip? And yeah, I'm having a minor freak out about it all. And but yeah, I feel like I'm taking like your small set piece and how you deal with the macro aspect of it and the depth of field, and I'm just making it bigger, and it's the same problems. So
it's the exact, but I mean, but larger gear. A lot of the ways that I deal with some of these issues is just by diffusing, and that way it looks like the lighting was diffused as opposed to my edges were diffused. So I don't know if you have access to like a massive scrim, you know, the ones that they use to like shoot cars, like maybe one of those.
That's coming up.
And then like the most powerful strobes that you can get.
I was actually talking to
like at least 1,000 watts.
Rob about that yesterday. I was like, hey, if you have multiple lights on a scrim, like 2 or 3 across a large scrim, is there going to be more than one shadow cast? Is there more than one shadow? Like we're talking about that. So, and then I was thinking about if you had it. Okay, so if you had your subject coming at you, maybe like at a 45-degree angle, and you're positioning the scrim, maybe camera right, and if it's off angle from the product, would I need to have a more power out of the light that's furthest from the back end of the light? So like the light ratio would have to change as you extend out to the furthest light. So I'm thinking about all this stuff now, and now I really feel nerdy.
Time for a light meter.
Yeah. Oh, I have.
That would really be handy in this shoot.
This has been my light meter and the back of my camera.
Yeah. Do you want me to send you an L308 just for the shoot?
Sure. Maybe.
Okay.
I think I can get one from the MacBot office. But anyways, yeah, this has been great. How about Taylor? Tell us, who are some of your biggest, like who have been your biggest clients that you've pulled in? Give me your top 3 that you were really proud to have worked with. And do you have any whales out there that you're chasing? Is there anyone out there who's like, we can like put that energy out into the world that you can hopefully book in the future? Your dream client.
You're making me brag.
No, go ahead, brag all over it.
My favorite client that I've ever, because I've worked with a few that I was just like, wow, I cannot believe, because I'm always just kind of like, you know, I look back to where I started, I look here now, and it's just like, wow, these people like actually want to work with me. Like, that's wild. But my favorite client that I've ever worked with was Good Hair Day, and they made hair tools. And I remember back when I had hair, I actually had some Good Hair Day products, like the flat iron, like the curling iron. I actually had those products. And that's how I was using this style in my hair. Is like the fact that like they reached out and they wanted me to create some evergreen content for them. That was absolutely mind-boggling to me. But honestly, I mean, it's still really crazy that I have the reach to work with a lot of these larger companies, but it's still the ability to give back and be able to work with some of the smaller companies. That's really what's important to me, is that I still am able to create, like, you know, studio grade high-end imagery for smaller brands, and then to watch them like release that content into their feeds, and then to watch their like feeds take off. Like that's the stuff that really makes my heart sing, you know, is working with like a lot of these smaller brands and knowing that like a lot of them are honest to God scraping together pennies to be able to work with me. And it's like really, it can be nerve-wracking, I know, to like make those investments back into your brand. And the fact that like they chose me to take that massive investment and like put that into my work, like that's really where you know, that's really what makes me happy, is like seeing those brands invest in my work and then release that content, and, you know, watching their brands take off. I know that was like a slight avoidance of your question, but I refocused onto like the area that really sparks my joy. And what really sparks my joy is working with some of these smaller brands that, you know, didn't maybe have access to those massive studios back in the day, or even now, like don't have access to those huge studios, but people like me exist, where we're producing, you know, great content, but, you know, we're still very accessible. And they access us and they release that content, and just watching like their pages go off and watching those likes come in and watching like their follower count go up. I love to see it.
we love a little bit of drama on the show too sometimes. So because this always
Ew.
prompts some like great responses, and we never know what we're gonna get. Do you have any horror stories? Do you have any like shit hit the fan, or this is like a client you'll never work with? You don't have to name names, but I mean, the last time we did this,
Oh no, and I
last time we got this
would.
though, we got a great sound bite, and it was literally F Nas, the rapper Nas.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was
Oh
yeah from
no.
a photography perspective.
Well, that's probably not going to be me.
You're too nice. You're too nice, Taylor.
I well, I'm nice, but I'm also strategic.
Yeah,
That's not gonna be me. But
he did not care.
I
There was no strategy that one.
that's not gonna be me. But I have had a few like I mean, no horror stories. I'm very good at like mitigating clients. Like I can generally kind of be like, okay, they're a little bit upset. Let me get in front of this. But I have had like clients who just were like at the end of their rope through no fault of my own, and will call me up and just cuss me clean out. I've had right, and it's just like, why are you cussing me out? I haven't done anything. It'll be at like 9:30 in the morning. Like the first thing on their like list of things to do is they'll call you up and just be like, "Yep, cuss out Taylor, done." And then they'll just go about their day. Or I've had
So weird.
excuse me, I've had like a client I've had clients like come to the studio and break things. So that was really hurtful because it's like trying to explain that to my insurance
What?
company where they're automatically going to be suspicious of like, did Taylor break this because he's trying to get something new? Like trying to like document that is just a pain. I've had people come and like break stuff. I had somebody throw a tantrum in the studio and like purposely break gear. So
Oh wow.
that was really unfun. But in general, like 99.96 of my clients are absolute joys to work with. Granted, I worked with like dozens and dozens and dozens of people, so really like the offending party is a rarity. It honestly is, but those they stick with you, and then you just kind of learn how to like see that coming and then just get in front of it as
Do you wish
quickly
you
as possible.
do you wish you had a video of the client breaking your stuff? Not only for the insurance company, but that would be great for social media these days.
No,
Blur them out.
no, I'm never the person to like drag somebody,
Mm.
um, because first of all, receipts last forever. Like people will take those screenshots, and I know there are people I know who have like screenshots like just saved in like a screenshot folder from like years and years ago.
The petty
But
folder.
also the petty folder,
Yeah.
and and I hate to be like political or whatever, but I'm a Black woman, and I have to like I have to be very mindful of how I present myself in this industry. So I have to be strategic about how I navigate these interpersonal relationships. So I'm not going to be petty. I'm going to actually see if I can turn some of these lemons into lemonade. And if necessary, just document everything. I had all of that documented in terms of email. I made sure that she admitted in an email that she had done that. And granted, it was more cussing, but she admitted it. And
Yeah.
I was able to just like send that off to the insurance. But I'm never going to just drag somebody
I wasn't
on
asking from
social
like a
media.
perspective of dragging somebody. I just, for instance, when I fell over with my camera and I smashed one of my cameras
Hmm.
into the ground, first thing I said is, I'm so happy that's on video because at least you can capitalize off of the ridiculousness of the quality. Not drag the person,
Mm.
censor them, whatever,
Hmm.
but have that clip of somebody breaking your stuff. Hey, that's the kind of stuff that goes off on socials these days.
Blur their face.
That no, it's true. It'd be likely to go viral. I just don't know how to do that type thing. Like I don't know how to present that
Yeah.
information
Yeah,
where it wouldn't come off like negatively.
I hear you.
There's learning moments in all these negative experiences. That's why I even bring it up. So I proposed a class for WPPI, and it's a panel. I've got 4 of good friends who are wedding photographers, and we're gonna do. I'm calling it disaster art, and it's when what to do and
Hmm.
when shit hits the fan, basically on a wedding day. Because last year I got my life threatened by a wedding guest who was gonna go get his gun and effing shoot me, and
Oh
yeah.
no!
And that right
Oh
there, that's a deal breaker. That's a I'm leaving, and my second finish is the wedding day.
yeah,
And we had an action. There was a course of action. I had to think myself. I had to like talk myself off the ledge, talk to the right people, make sure the bride didn't find out because it would have ruined her day. And
yeah.
but I got through it. probably the most challenging, the top most challenging thing I've done on a wedding day. So there are learning moments in this, and now I can look back on it and be like, that's a great story. But on the day of, it was traumatizing. I was freaked out, and I didn't know how to like move
Yeah.
forward. So I think this is going to be a fun class to like be able to talk about what are the takeaways when shit really hits the fan. Like, what do you do when you're just punched in the mouth and you feel like everything's going wrong? So what do you do? And so I think there's learning moments, there's teachable moments in disaster. So yeah, anyways, that's where I like to, that's what I like to, why I brought it up, because it's just always fun to hear about these stories. Like, what did you do? Like, why are you boss? How come you're such a boss? How did you handle it? You know?
Man,
You're teaching this at WPPI, you said?
I proposed it, so I did my class proposal,
Okay.
so we'll see if I get it.
Oh, that's right. That was last
Mhm.
night. Yeah, the applications were due.
Justin, you should do a call out at the end of it for people to submit and then make a coffee book out of it.
All the worst stories.
Well, like the worst stories
would
and
be
then the
nice.
solutions. That'd be
Yeah.
actually like helpful, interesting resource.
Yeah, I hope they pick this
That
up.
would be a cute resource.
And everybody that's joining me, they've all got equally like, and especially I made sure we had like great representation, because women who photograph weddings have a whole different set of experiences than we do as men. Like I feel so bad.
It's
Yeah,
bad.
just like bad misconduct, drunk uncles, drunk groomsmen, touchy grabby people, like violence, like I everything I've heard it all. And so this panel is going to be sobering for the people who check. If we get it, there's going to be a lot. And it's, yeah, we're kind of, it's story time, but it's also like it's a teachable moment. So we've got a lot to talk about if we get this class.
That's a cute idea. That's a good one. I think I'm optimistic.
It's so unique
that they'll pick that
too.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because a lot of people do actually struggle with that. Like, a lot of people genuinely do struggle with that, like customer interaction. Like, they don't know what to do when they're like really conflicted with like a bad thing. So I think that's a good idea.
Contractually, what protects you contractually, indemnity, like how are we protecting ourselves legally in the event of like, am I able to sever my service here because of something happening? You know, there's just, and how do you still get paid? Like, you know, you still deserve to be paid for your time. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun conversation, and this could happen in any arena of photography. You know, someone could
how to de-escalate.
Yeah.
Like, how to de-escalate. That's
or how to escalate if you live that life, you know, if you're about that life. How to throw them hands. how to
turn into an MMA lesson.
You're gonna be
at the end of this, like if you need to.
Or with if you're Mike Tyson and you're being bothered by a guest on a plane flight behind you.
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Oh, he threw hands. He lit a guy up.
Yeah, that guy was just.
Who bothers Mike Tyson?
Right?
That's such
what are you doing?
Yeah. Who does that?
We already saw The Hangover. That doesn't go well.
Yeah, you don't.
And he's like clearly identifiable.
Yeah,
like,
you don't tug on Superman's cape. You don't poke the sleeping lion. Like, that guy is like a loaded. And the thing is, he's very self-aware and he is like a pretty like emotionally intelligent man at this phase of his life. I've read a lot about him, and I've watched his one-man show. He's very self-aware. To get him there, you really got to be working hard to get him there, and that guy got him there. And anyways, yeah, so that was crazy.
Well, he messed around and found out.
What? Taylor, you have been an absolute joy. It's been fun nerding out with you. Is there anything going on right now that you'd like our viewers, our listeners to know about you have going on in your life? Things that are, I'm taking a page out of the Hot Ones YouTube channel, but he always like, what's going on in your life? Let the people know. Something work related, something personal that people should know.
You know, it's funny because you actually caught me like right at the end of my vacation. So I don't have like too much happening right now. I'm so sorry, I'm like boring right now. But yeah, it's April. So in May and June, I'm planning on hosting an in-house workshop. This is my idea. I'm supposed to be launching it in May. I've pretty much put all the pieces together for a 3-day workshop for those who are looking to get into product and beauty photography. So day 1 will be business. We'll be talking all about commercial business and how to structure it and how to navigate it. Day 2 will be either beauty or product, and day 3 will be the converse, so either product or beauty. So that is going to be a June or August. Still looking at my schedule a little bit, navigating around these client shoots. but that'll be either a June or an August. So whoever's watching, look out for that.
All right, that means we got to get the episode up in May.
Oh, we will.
Well, oh,
No.
I forgot that this was like
No, it's great.
like a
No, we'll get
delayed,
it up. You're on our production schedule.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. Yes, so that's going to be either a June or an August. July is my kid's birthday, so we're going to be down in Tampa for a good amount of July. I'll also be up in Chicago for a click away. So I won't be teaching, but I will be there talking with the girls and you know, just networking and meeting some new friends.
Is it click away or click con?
Pretty busy as well. Click away conference.
Oh, okay. They changed. Oh, that's not click con though. That's the other conference, right? In Chicago. Okay.
ClickCon may have been bought
rebranded.
or rebranded.
It's not ProCam anymore that's doing it.
Right.
That I'm aware of.
No, click away, like click the women's photographer organization. They do click away conference.
Oh, okay.
And this year it's up in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
Any other conferences or shows coming up?
Yes, actually. So in October, I can't believe we're almost in May. That's wild. But yeah, in October, out in Arizona is going to be the Cookout. So I will be there. Dr. Tamaya Colbin, she hosts for the past like 4 or 5 years now. She's hosted the Cookout, so I will be there as well. Meeting with family.
I want to say I've met Tamaya, but we have like overlapping circles. Also, this begs the question: how does one get invited to the Cookout?
I want to say there are actually still tickets available. If you want, I can go and get the link and see if there are tickets available.
It sounds fun.
But it's going to be in Arizona. It was in Orlando this past year. Super fun. That was actually my first time attending. I've been wanting to attend for years, and that was my first time attending this past year. So I said I have to go. Like that was probably the best conference I've ever been to.
And
so
in Phoenix or Tucson? Phoenix, probably, right? The Cookout. It's probably
I feel like
Phoenix.
yes.
No, nobody comes to
I
Tucson.
feel like yes.
Okay.
Oh. I feel like yes. I feel like I've heard Phoenix floating around, but I cannot be sure, so I don't want to say 100%.
Yeah. I'm sure we're going to have to cross paths here sooner or later, either through WPPI or through Tamron dealings, because they're very good about keeping us involved in our industry and supporting us with all the like speaking engagements and stuff. So I hope we get to hang out soon.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure we will meet at some point now that we're kind of coming out of the pandemic a little bit. I'm sure we'll meet up at some point. Well, I'll be at Imaging. I'll be at Clickaway. I'll be at the Cookout. When is WPPI? Like the next one?
I think it's back on February.
Yeah.
Last week of February, beginning of March every year now.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna try my darndest to make it to WPPI as well. I didn't get to go last time because I had client stuff, but I will try my darndest to go next year. I'm going to try to do more conferences. I'm going to actually try to prioritize conferences. I've been so lax in like prioritizing them, and I'm going to try to start going to more.
We'll look forward to it. Thanks for coming on with us.
Just to catch up with friends.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's always a good time to catch up with friends. If I didn't have anything else going on, like engagements or responsibilities, it's just to be with friends for sure. Which always leads to the other stuff, though. It's like the more friends you make at these events, the more like we get wrapped up in the dealings of like being involved with the industry. So you can't avoid it. You're just hanging out with people and you get places.
I agree. But well, that's all I have going on.
Thanks for coming
on. Hopefully,
Taylor.
by the time we get this episode up, we still have tickets. You still have some tickets available for your next workshop. Yeah,
well, it'll actually be my first workshop because I just got into this space. So I've hosted workshops in like other people's spaces, and I've like guest starred or guest attended other people's workshops. But this will be my very first workshop.
Well, I hope it goes excellent.
Awesome.
Yeah,
good luck.
I hope it goes great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on, Taylor. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we can have you on again in the future. But looking forward to crossing paths with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I had a ton of fun. Thank you so much.